Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of YouTube Live with Google Edu OnAir. Before we begin, I want to talk about some accessibility accommodations. First thing, we're using Google Slides today, which means that I can come down into my control panel and turn on closed captions. This is live captions that is using our software to write out what I'm saying. This was not pre-scripted. It's all going to happen live. This is a casual conversation with our special guest star today. And so know that at times it may not get exactly what we're saying as we get excited and maybe speed up our speech. So we'll both take care to speak slowly and articulately so that this accommodation works. Also, you can see above me, we have our marvelous American Sign Language interpreter here, who is going to also make sure that this is accessible for those of you who need that accommodation. My name is Jennie Magiera, and I am the Global Head of Education Impact here at Google. I'm a lifelong educator, a mother, and incredibly thrilled to welcome our guest star for this part one of two series around emotional intelligence and regulating our emotions during these uncertain times. Dr. Mark Brackett is the director for the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and he has a prolific resume in supporting educators, parents, and community members and helping us better understand how to leverage emotion to be the best versions of ourselves. He's also the creator of a framework called Ruler that many of you may have heard of. I know about it because my daughter's school uses it all the time, and I had a bit of a fangirl moment of being starstruck getting to meet Mark, seeing at this incredible tool that my daughter's school uses, meeting the man behind the tool. So thank you, Mark, for being with us. I can't wait to learn with you today and again on Thursday.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you for having me.
So let's dive right in. And for those of you who are watching live right here on YouTube, you can see over here, oh, let's try it that way. I think it's this way. There is a live chat, or maybe if you're on a mobile down below, where you can ask questions. We're going to be going into the live chat throughout this broadcast to have some audience participation. But I have some questions that I've been dying to ask you myself, Mark. So if we can just dig into those.
Let's go.
I mentioned, my young daughter, Lucy, uses Ruler in her school, and she's a toddler, so she's really grappling with understanding the wide world of emotions. Can you tell us more about Ruler first, and then I have a follow-up question.
Sure. So Ruler is two things. It's the name of our approach to social and emotional learning that is now in well over 2,500 schools across the United States and in other countries. And that's a comprehensive approach for leaders, for teachers, for students, for families, all to learn the skills of emotional intelligence. So that's also the acronym for the skills. And so R stands for recognizing emotions. So right now, Jennie, I'm trying to see your facial expression and your body language. And I'm like, all right, is she interested or is she bored with me? So I'm trying to read your emotions. I'm trying to be aware of my own feelings. That's the R. The U is understanding of emotion. So why am I having these feelings? What might have caused these feelings? The L is labeling them. So let's say I'm angry. Am I peeved or am I enraged? If I'm happy, am I ecstatic or am I just content? Mm. The E in Ruler is expressing emotions. So knowing how and when to express those feelings. A lot of like we have people from all over the world I see on here. And so there are cultural rules around expressing emotions. There's no right or wrong. It's just some cultures have strong eye contact, others don't. Some people shake hands, some people bow. Again, no judgment. It's all about learning, actually. And then the final R in Ruler, which is the big one, is emotion regulation. The strategies that we all need to help us manage our own feelings. And as we'll talk about on Thursday, how we help our kids or our students manage theirs.
That's so amazing. And I think as I'm hearing you unpack this acronym, and as an educator, all educators love a good acronym. So I'm very thankful for that as well. Something I'm trying to understand as both a mother and an educator is how to balance that. And I know so many folks are are grappling with that. A lot of parents who were not, classically trained educators are now having to put on the educator hat with homeschooling and hybrid
Sure.
learning. So as we're emotional beings ourselves, how can we as adults use manifest ruler and model that for our children who are now looking to us to be their instructors?
So that's like a 6-month course that you just asked for in like 20 minutes. But let's just start with the first. As you know, I wrote this book called Permission to Feel. And to me, that's the beginning of the journey, right? You've got to give yourself, the mom, the teacher, you've got to give your children, you got to give everybody, right, that permission to feel. And what that means really is that there's no such thing as a good or a bad emotion. All emotions are information. So I think that's the very first step, is just acknowledging that it's okay to have all feelings. I was just talking with a group this morning about this. And, like right now, there's a lot of anger in our society. There's a lot of anxiety in our society. And it's justifiable. There are real reasons to be angry and anxious. So it's like freeing to just say, you know what? It's okay. I can be angry and I can be anxious. And there's no one judging me for it. And I'm not going to judge myself for it. The second piece, as you know from my work, is I think we all have to strive to be emotion scientists as opposed to emotion judges. And so what's the difference? Well, the emotion scientist is someone who is open to feelings, curious about feelings. They're in what we might call learner mode, where the emotion judge is more critical, closed, ignores feelings. They just think like, I feel like crap or I feel fine. There's no like differentiation. Whereas the emotion scientist is like, gosh, I don't know if I'm angry or disappointed. I want to be precise. Am I frustrated or am I overwhelmed? Am I peeved? It's getting real specific. And then I think really importantly, well, let me ask you this question, Jennie. Have you ever like failed like at regulating your own feelings over the last couple of months?
Yes, that was a big capital bold underline yes.
Yeah, I have two, and my mother-in-law is living with us, and the joke at dinner is like, "Are you really the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence?" And I am most of the time, but I tell you, like sometimes this quarantine and the stress levels, it just gets the best of you. And so when you fail at dealing with your feelings, like what do you say to yourself? Do you say to yourself like, I'm a loser, I'm never going to be any good at this, I'm going to be a terrible teacher, I'm a terrible parent? Or do you say, all right, let's take a minute here. These are really stressful times. I messed up. I can apologize. I can forgive. I can move on. And so that's that growth versus fixed mindset. As you know from Carol Dweck's work, it applies to our emotional lives too.
This is so helpful. This actually just happened yesterday where I think it was a two-way emotional street where my daughter was refusing to eat her dinner as toddlers tend to do. I was frustrated with a lot of other things. She was frustrated. My husband was frustrated. And I just could feel like the thick tension in the air, right? And everything was about to go south. And in that moment, I swallowed my feelings and I kind of like put on a mask and I said, I don't want to model frustration for my daughter. I'm just going to smile and smile through it and not acknowledge my feelings. So do I hear you saying like, maybe I could have just articulated that I was frustrated without blowing up? Would that have been a better way to go?
I think you just solved your own problem.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for your daughter to see you frustrated because it's being real and transparent, and it's showing her like this behavior caused me to be frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you've got to be the role model, right? If then you threw her plate across the table right? And then stomped out of the room and said, I'm not talking to you tonight, like that's not good. So, right, you've got to have the strategies, right, to manage your feelings, to communicate them in a helpful way. And then you're modeling to your daughter, guess what? We all have strong feelings, but it doesn't mean that they have power over you.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm getting a mini therapy session. I love it. Thank you, Google, for having
Yeah,
this event. Okay, so kind of let's continue down that path. So as adults, we have these moments where we lose control, where we're feeling big feelings too.
yeah,
Um, and we know that our children, be it our students or the children in our homes, can feel that, and we know that. I think a lot of adults can tell their kids are
definitely.
incredibly aware of our feelings, but a lot of us are feeling, as you named, unsafe, frustrated, confused, angry during the quarantine, during this pandemic, during everything that's happening in the world. So how can we help ourselves feel safe and manage our own anxiety during this very unpredictable time? Do you have any strategies or tips for us to unpack these big feelings? Aside from doing a YouTube live with you and getting some free therapy.
Sure. I have a slide where I talk about what I call the big seven. So maybe we can go to that slide.
Yeah, for sure.
And the first is, again, giving yourself that permission to feel, like just acknowledging these are difficult times, and it's okay to be anxious, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be frustrated. um, and just so you go back one slide, I'll just take people through this really fast. Is this is Go back one more. uh, Back two.
Sorry.
That's
This one?
okay. No, backwards. Sorry.
Sorry. That way. And let me just pull it back up. Let me come from the beginning. Sorry. For all of you who are watching at
Well,
home,
firstly,
I'm
yeah,
driving.
go ahead.
I'm driving it, so Mark's kind of flying blind right now. Keep going.
Well, actually, now go back to the previous one so I can show people the mood meter.
Yeah.
So this is one of our tools. This is actually the inside of my book, but also a tool that's in every ruler school. Literally thousands of classrooms have this, as a poster, as an app, and it really is very helpful to label your feelings. And a lot of parents use it with their kids. So they sit down and they say, "Are you in the yellow, green, blue, or red?" And then, "All right, let's talk about which feeling we're having. Why are we having that feeling? Um, let's talk about what we can do to support ourselves." But if you go to the next slide, this is really showing what our nation is feeling. So we did this study with 6,000 educators, and here's what we found: anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. When we looked at how kids are feeling, what we found is frustrated, bored, anxious. You can imagine. I mean, the remote learning that happened in the spring was really tough for kids. They're frustrated with technology. They're bored with like not being able to do a lot. They're anxious too. And so if you go to the next slide, the argument, is a tricky one. And this, I think, is related to one of your questions, which is that's how we feel on the left. But people are always saying, but isn't the goal to be happy? And I don't think that's the right way to think about it, right? Because I don't know if we can just go from anxious and frustrated and angry to happy. And so emotion regulation is really about first accepting our feelings, and then secondly, knowing what strategies are the most helpful for me, right? To either keep my feeling, because you ever have a really good day? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, I want to stay here. This is like really good.
Yeah.
And then there are times when you're like, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't take it, and your brain is going nuts and you're having all negative self-talk. All right, I need a strategy to reduce the self-talk. And so let's go to the next slide. Keep going. And as I said before, the first step is permission to feel. Is just giving yourself that permission to feel. And you might even think what that means. If I were to ask you, Jen, I'm putting you on the spot here, but you put me on the spot too.
Sure. Yes.
So I say to you, what does it mean for you to have permission to feel?
I think it's kind of rewinding the clock a bit and thinking about last night and sitting at the table and feeling like, as a mom, I I I wasn't allowed to be in that space of frustration and feeling the level of anxiety I was having at that moment. I had to bottle it up because as the adult, as the role model, I'm supposed to be kind of even keel and positive all the time, like always happy and always like smiling mom.
Mm-hmm.
But I think permission to feel is allowing myself to be a fully realized human being and to your point, like not throw my plate across the table, but to say, hey, Lucy, I'm feeling frustrated right now, and here's why. And I even just hearing that is really freeing to think about.
Well, and also what you're bringing up is something really important, which is that if you think as a parent or as a teacher, you always have to be positive, then you're really very one note for your kid,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like they're not seeing, like you were saying, this fully developed human being that has lots of feelings, and like things get on your nerves and things make you frustrated and annoyed and disappointed and angry. And that's life, right? Life is an emotional roller coaster ride. So we might as well be as transparent as possible,
Mm-hmm.
for our kids, because what'll happen, and this, I see this all the time in schools, even schools that like go through our training, they have this weird belief that I have to be positive all the time. So the teacher, like it's, September, good morning, everyone. Mr. Brackett is in the yellow. And then, it's October and Mr. Brackett is in the yellow. And then, these kids are failing their tests, or they have a parent who's ill, or they're sick, and they're not in the yellow, but they've only ever heard their teacher say, they're in the yellow. And then all of a sudden the whole thing becomes completely, inauthentic. And so we really want honesty here, because if we're not honest with our feelings, then we don't know really what to do with our feelings. And if you go to the next slide, this is not just the Mark Brackett, Professor Brackett's opinion, right? This is like serious research, which shows that how we feel like literally drives our attention. I mean, when you are really stressed out, right, your brain goes into survival mode, not learning mode. Decision making, right? How we feel affects our choices and our decisions. Like when you're in a bad mood, right, you make choices that are not always the best for you. Relationships. Think about that. What we say in our center is that emotions push us to either approach or avoid. Maybe you've been in your position for a little bit. In previous jobs, have you ever worked with someone who is really difficult?
Yeah, sure. All the time, of course.
Someone who like makes kind of like weird facial expressions and immediately roll their eyes, or they look disgusted all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you think about that person, do you say to yourself something like, I want to work with them for the rest of my life?
No, not typically.
Exactly. Because emotions are approach avoid. And so as teachers, right, we have to be really mindful of our facial expressions, because it's contagious in the classroom. It's contagious at home. Physical and mental health. I mean, I've done a lot of research here, which teachers, for example, the climate of the school predicts teacher stress levels, right? You've been a teacher, right? You ever worked in a school where it's like just really like the climate is not that positive?
Yeah, I've been fortunate that my schools have been pretty great, but I've definitely served in schools where I felt that. And you're right, it you can feel it when you open the door.
Totally. It's like you're welcome, you're unwelcome.
Mhm.
And that affects your emotions as a teacher throughout the day. And it actually affects your sleep and your own health. And then finally, performance and creativity. What we say in our center is that emotions are the fuel of our creativity, but also the skills of emotional intelligence determine whether or not we're going to actually fulfill that creativity. So, all right, that was a lot of the background. So now we can go into that slide on all the strategies. And so we got to build these skills, and here we are. And I think, this is what, when people call our center or ask for help, this is what they're really looking for.
Mhm.
And so the first is, as I said, and I'll say it 100,000 times, right? You got to just give yourself the permission to have those feelings, and your kids. The second is a really important one, which is that, have you ever been like really, really frustrated or annoyed with your kid?
And it's hard to admit it live on the air with thousands of people watching that.
It's
Yeah,
okay. But, or with, a partner or whoever,
yeah,
like
sure.
where you're just like, I'm
Yeah,
going to lose it.
yeah. Today she
And
did
so,
wanted to get off the floor and put her pants on, and she just like laid prostrate face down on the floor. I was feeling frustrated. Yeah.
yeah. And so in those moments, you don't think to yourself like, this is why I want to be a mom. You're like, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to lose it. And so in those moments, the best thing to do is just take a breath and try to deactivate. You have to bring down your energy level, because what's happened when you've gotten really frustrated or annoyed is that your cortisol levels, your actual sympathetic nervous system is activated, and you go into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And that's not going to be the helpful mom or teacher mode. And the only way to fix that really is to deactivate. You have to just bring down, the heart rate so that your brain is calm and that you can think clearly, and you can say, oh yeah, I'm a mom who wants to be the most loving, compassionate, kind mom. Let me think about how that mom, could serve my kid.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's just basic self-care. You've got to, like, I don't know, have you ever felt like, I think you said this, like not getting enough sleep?
Yep, that's my.
And so you ever notice in the mornings where you don't have enough sleep, it's like a lot faster, your irritation?
Yeah, yeah, and then I also make silly mistakes. Like before, just tweeted out the link to this YouTube live and forgot the link to it. So, and then I feel bad about myself. So I think all of that resonates.
So this is where you have to be like a prevention scientist. Not an like, and the prevention scientist says, okay, like I know that I'm not the best mom in the mornings, but I don't get enough sleep. So I've got to really work hard at going to bed earlier. I know for me, exercise is really important to me. And I know that if I don't get like when I work out, like, and I sweat, all of a sudden, like I feel the endorphins, all my irritation is kind of like, whatever. And it's literally a biochemical reason. You've actually like released these hormones, that help you to think and be more positive. So there's like a real biology to taking care of ourselves, from whether it be, eating nutritious foods if it's all possible, or getting that sleep, and exercise. Then there's like the psychological self-care. One of my friends who's a scientist, he said, Mark, have you ever gone just for like what he calls an awe walk? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, just leave everything at home and go in your neighborhood or wherever you can go, and just like look at the ground and notice the cracks and the ants, and look at the grass, and then look at the trees or look at the buildings. And what he's shown is that literally helps you to come down, be more present, be more mindful. Healthy relationships. This is a big one. This is another neurochemical called oxytocin. So when you are in a room with someone that you feel connected to, you literally have more positive chemicals. And so that's just a simple one. Like, just be there for somebody.
Yeah.
I joke in my book, I call it be an Uncle Marvin, because my Uncle Marvin was my hero.
Aww.
And so I'm like, Uncle Marvin was that caring, non-judgmental, compassionate person. So just being in his presence was a strategy. I think the big one, and the one that maybe we can spend, a couple minutes on, is managing your thoughts. I don't know about you, but I was raised with a lot of negative self-talk. I was bullied as a kid, and I was too fat, or I was too skinny, and my nose was too big, my nose was too short, I was too short, I was too tall, I was too feminine, too whatever it is. It's like, and I find in my research that so many people, grow up with having a lot of negative self-talk. Like when they make a mistake, the dialogue is like, I'm a loser, I'm never going to be good at anything, or even worse. And so I tell people, I urge parents and schools to think about, like, how much time do you dedicate to helping yourself and your kids have more positive self-talk? And, most people laugh at me like, I don't spend any time thinking about that. But it is so important. So there's a trick to it. And it's the simplest that we can go into right now, because of time, is show empathy for yourself. So what does that mean? Like when I'm really, really like at home with my family, like irritated, and I'm going to say something that like I know I'm going to regret, I do the following. I pause, I take my breath, and I say this, Mark, remember, you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence. And then I say, like, how would that person respond? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, Mark, who's triggered, wants to like, but Mark, like this figure of like professor of emotional intelligence, like he's a magician, he's a wizard. And so moms can do that, teachers can do that. Whoever your role model is, you can just say like, what would this person do? Or use your name. Just say like, when I'm very anxious, instead of, that, what I say to myself is something, Mark, this feeling is impermanent. And it's so relieving for me because, I've had a lot of anxiety in my life. And when you feel it, it feels like it's permanent. Does that resonate?
Yeah, for sure.
Like when you're anxious and you're like having that catastrophic thinking, you're like,
yeah.
it's like a toothache, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, and then you just have to, I say to myself, Mark, this feeling is impermanent. You've been this way before and it's been better the next day. So lots of strategies. And maybe we can just see if, are there people who are asking questions?
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot coming in. So Shannon is wondering, well, she has two questions. One about, she wants to help understand how to identify and distinguish between those healthy Uncle Marvin relationships and unhealthy relationships. And she had another question too that I think is really thoughtful about, it's kind of like breaking down the taboo about talking about feelings. So in a lot of cultures or spaces, people aren't comfortable talking about feelings. So how do you cultivate that environment of safety to ensure individuals are confident that they have the permission to feel? So the two questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to do a whole nother one of those too.
Yeah.
I think, the healthy relationships, when you're in a relationship with someone who is making you second guess yourself, it's time to really check in. And I think that's the critical thing. When someone is trying to make you believe something about yourself that is not true, like a lot of times in romantic relationships, oh, you're just so sensitive. Well, what's wrong with that, by the way? And so like when people are kind of telling you things that might make you feel bad about yourself, you really got to be mindful of that. What was the second question again? Oh, about
like how do we creating an environment where it's safe to talk about our feelings and safe to have that permission to feel?
I think just be the role model. As the parent, as a teacher, just be the role model. And it's that easy. And if we make it into something that feels like pathology or negative or bad, then it becomes really weird. But if it's a casual conversation, just so like for parents, I always recommend, like, don't be like, all right, let's have feelings talk at breakfast. Like that's like kids are going to be rolling their eyes, right? It's got to like on a walk, you just say, you know what? Like I had this really frustrating meeting today. I couldn't take it anymore. This person was driving me out of my mind. But then I had lunch with a friend and it was really fun to catch up and we talked about this. And so you're just role modeling like the natural ways of weaving in feelings to conversations.
I love this. And so Matt actually has a somewhat related question. So Matt's asking about bringing this from our breakfast tables to our staff lounge, if you will. So do you have any tips for helping staff understand this need to be an emotional scientist? Because many are dismissive of it. Like, I'm a math teacher. I'm doing this. I don't have time to do SEL or emotional scientist work. So how might we, as school leaders, address that?
So Matt, I think the first step is going back to the science. And so we won't go back to that slide right now, but that slide where I talked about emotions as the drivers of attention and learning and decision making and all that, that's my go-to slide. Because when people doubt me and they're like, well, you're just, the fluffy scientist from Yale. I'm like, this is not Mark's opinion. Like, this is decades of research. Like, your brain, when it's feeling certain emotions, is not processing information. The second is to just, in the end, I'll show you on my website. There's tons. I have a blog. I've got tons of articles that are, free to download that you should check out. But what I would also say is something, provocative, which is ask your faculty how they want to feel this school year. And you can create what we call in our center an emotional intelligence charter, which is literally a charter of the feelings that everyone hopes to experience. And you'll be amazed. I've done this actually nationally in a study. People want to feel right now in school, they want to be excited, which is interesting, but they also want to feel safe and they want to feel supported. That's in my national study. I don't know what it would look like in your school, Matt, but I encourage you can even do it anonymously, is just ask the question. How do we want to feel as a faculty? How do we want to feel as a staff? And then what do we need to do, either in person or remotely, in order to have these feelings more frequently?
Thank you. And so I think the next question for Tanika is about seeing this tangibly and the resources that you provide. So you mentioned your website, markbrackett.com, which I'll put in the YouTube live chat for everyone to see again, and it's here on the screen. But Tanika's wondering, are there any steps, worksheets, or resources that you have available for school social workers, and I think other school professionals, to share with their students online? So as they're going to distance learning, can we share the mood meter? Do you have anything else on your site?
Well, I mean, I don't like to be always promoting, but this is my book, and it's called Permission to Feel.
I know, so you can always grab that. I got mine here.
Oh, cool. But importantly, on our website, you can get to this website through my website. You go to markbrackett.com. You can go to Ruler, which is our center's approach to SEL, and we have built literally an entire free section for COVID-19 and difficult conversation resources. So videos like this, and just downloadable things that you can do immediately to help yourself and your kids. And I think importantly, on Thursday, we're going to go into not so much the adult piece, like you, the mom, what we talked about, but what are the steps to working with kids?
I love it. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I'm so excited we get a part 2. So for those who are, just wanting more, we're going to get, as Mark said on Thursday, to zoom in more on the student as the focus of this, our children. Mark, I can't thank you enough for being with us today for my mini therapy session. And I'm just watching the chat, and I see so many people are really inspired and are taking away tons of ideas to bring both to their breakfast tables and their classrooms from today's conversation. So much gratitude to you.
Well, I really appreciate being invited on, so thank you.
And to all of you out there, parents, community members, and educators who are supporting young people through these difficult times, thank you for your work. Thank you for staying the course. And I hope that we all, after today, give ourselves a little bit more of that permission to feel. For more information about Mark, you can go to his website, markbrackett.com. That's Mark with a C, Brackett with 2 T's.com. Put it in the chat, and you can see it here on the screen. And I really do have to recommend this book, Permission to Feel. I've recommended it to so many of my friends and colleagues, and I think it's really, really salient in this moment that we take a moment of that self-care to think about our own emotional intelligence. And I love that idea. I'm my new thing when I grow up, I want to be an emotional scientist. So
that's cool. Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great day, and see you all again, same time, same place on Thursday.
Bye, everybody.